Hi, welcome back to Creative Mizat in Read a Book series. Today we are going to read favorite stories from Hindu myths. The best introduction your child will have to Hindu mythology by Arshia Sattar, illustrated by Mansi Takar. So there are 8 stories covered in this book. We are going to read first 2 stories. The Churning of the Ocean, Mahishasura, the buffalo demon. One day, the sage Durvasa, who's known for his bad temper, saw Indra, king of gods, going by on an elephant. As it happened, Durvasa was in a mellow mood and he gave Indra a garland of beautiful flowers. Indra did not think much of it and hung the garland around the neck of the elephant he was riding. The elephant was uncomfortable. He pulled off the garland with his trunk and tossed it to the ground. Then he stepped on it, trampling it into the dust. Durvasa was enraged. He could not believe that Indra had shown so little respect for the gift he had been given. He cursed the king of gods to lose all his physical strength, his power, his glory, even his kingdom. Indra realized his mistake and tried to make amends, but Durvasa was not to be pacified when went off in a great huff. Soon enough, the gods began to lose their battles with Asuras, and before long, Bali, the Asura king, was sitting on the throne of heaven. The gods turned to Indra and blamed him for what had happened. But the king of gods could not think of a way to win his kingdom back. Indra went to Vishnu and begged him for help. I must have my kingdom back. The gods cannot live anywhere but in heavens. Help us, Vishnu, he cried. Vishnu understood that the only way the gods would once again be superior to Asuras was by drinking Amrita, the nectar of immortality. And to get that, they would have to churn the mighty ocean. Mount Mantara would be the churning pole, and Vasuki, the divine serpent who was wrapped around the throat of Shiva, would be the churning rope. But the rope would have to be pulled from both ends of the water to be properly steered. Vishnu explained to Indra that the Asuras would have to be part of this enterprise, that they would pull one end of the rope and the gods would pull the other. Between them, the ocean would be churned and it would throw up all kinds of marvelous things, including the nectar of immortality. Indra was not at all pleased about making a partnership with the Asuras, but he wanted his kingdom back. He would have to acquire the precious nectar, and he could not do that without including the Asuras in his plan. Indra went to Bali and said, Bali, Lord of the Asuras, we are going to churn the ocean. All kinds of wonderful things will emerge from the waters when we do this. But we need the Asuras to help pull one end of the churning rope. Will you join us? Bali eagerly agreed, confident that the Asuras would have an equal share in whatever gifts the bounteous ocean produced. The gods and the Asuras are assembled on a bright and beautiful day. They were all excited and they shouted and laughed and clapped each other on the back. Mount Mandara was brought in as the pole. Smooth as silk, Vasugi slithered off Shiva's neck and wound himself around the mountain, his head on one side and his tail on the other. The Asuras rushed to the side of his head, and before the gods could even react, they shouted, We are taking the side. You hold his tail. The Asuras and the gods grabbed Vasuki's head and tail and started to pull. Mount Mandara began to turn slowly, 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 but equally slowly it began to sink. Again, the gods appealed to Vishnu for help. How can we churn the ocean if a churning pole is sinking? They shouted. Vishnu, do something. In a trice, Vishnu turned himself into a giant turtle. He swam to the bottom of the ocean and slipped under the mountain, holding it firmly on his back. The churning pole steadied, and again the gods and the Asuras pulled this way and that. They agitated the ocean, whose waves rose higher and higher until they seemed to touch the sky. The waters roared and thundered, and the gods and the Asuras were drenched in salty spray, but they didn't care. At last, the ocean began to throw up its treasures. 14 jewels, bigger and brighter than you have ever seen, spilled forth. Among them was the spectacular spectacular Kaustuba, a gem so magnificent that it could only be worn by Vishnu. As the asuras coughed and sputtered and reeled under the hot breath and poisonous fumes that came out of Vasuki's mouth, the ocean continued to produce wonder after wonder. Along with 99 other horses, there were as swift as the wind came Ucheshravas, the whitest of white horses. This was the horse that the sisters Vinata and Kadru would argue over many years later. Kamadhenu, the cow who could grant every wish, also came out of the ocean, as did Kalpavriksha, the wishing tree. Another divine tree, the sweet smelling Parijada, emerged and went to Nandana, Indra's garden. A long time later, Krishna stole the tree and brought it to earth to make his wives happy. But there was still more in store for Indra, king of gods. The mighty Airavata, best of all the elephants of the three worlds, came out of the roaring waters and became Indra's mount. A sweet curved crescent moon rose from the waves and settled in Shiva's hair. Pearls of immeasurable beauty, softly lustrous, came forth, and so did Lakshmi, goddess of wealth. Nidra, goddess of sleep, appeared as well. She was the color of night and she was lazy. The Apsaras merged each more lovely than the one before. Menaka and Urvashi and Ramba and Kuntikastala and so many others. They became dancers in Indra's court, turning into a place of pleasure and beauty. Some say that even Vishnu's imperishable weapon, the Sudarshana Chakra, came out of waters along with the gleaming white conch shell that he always carries. After 1,000 years of turning and churning, the great serpent Vasuki vomited, spewing the deadly Kalahalavish poison from his mouth. It was black, oozing mess, and so some people call it Kalakuta. The gods and the Suras grew very agitated. They ran hither and thither, knowing that nothing in the world could counter Kalahala. Shiva was watching the commotion from far away and he knew that only he could help. He came down from his mountains and offered to swallow the poison. He drank it quickly, his eyes turned red, his cheeks bulged, sweat poured from his forehead, his head snapped backwards. Shiva's wife Parvati feared for her husband's life. She clasped her hands around his throat, stopping the poison from entering the rest of his body. She was recovered, but the power of the poison had stained his throat forever blue. At long last, Dhanvantri, who was to become the god's physician, stepped out of the waters, holding a pot. In it was Amrita, the nectar of immortality, the miraculous potion that could defeat death, the drink that everyone had been waiting for. The gods and the Asuras dropped Vasuki and ran towards Dhanvantri and the pot. Asuras got there first and made off with the precious liquid. The gods wailed and beat their breasts. As usual, they went running to Vishnu and threw themselves at his feet. The nectar of immortality, that Amrita, was supposed to be for us. Now the Asuras have it. What shall we do? They cried together. Before their astonished eyes, Vishnu transformed himself into Mohini, a woman even more beautiful and alluring than the Apsaras that had emerged from the ocean. Mohini's waist was slim and supple, her eyes were more like lotus petals, her skin gleamed like soft moonlight, her lips were the color of forest berries, and when she smiled it was as if the three worlds held their breath. Mohini swayed over to where the Asuras were and distracted them with her charms. The Asuras were enchanted, and in their eagerness to get Mohini's attention, they dropped the pot of Amrita and chased after her. In a moment, the gods swooped down and made off with the pot. Gleefully, they began to drink from it, convinced that now they would always have the upper hand against all their enemies. But an Asura named Swarabhanu disguised himself as a god and slipped in amongst them. As he drank his share of the Amrita, he was noticed by Sun and the Moon, who recognized him for who he truly was. They quickly alerted Mohini and she threw Vishnu's discs at the Asura, slicing off his head. Since the Amrita was still in his mouth, his head became immortal and he came to be known as Raghu. Now Rahu is the asura of the eclipse, and all year long he chases the sun and the moon across the skies, seeking revenge for what they did to him. Every now and then Rahu catches up with them. He swallows them and holds them in his mouth. But just as a little while, for the sun and the moon are protected by the gods. Second story, Mahishasura, the buffalo demon. Diti, the mother of Asuras, was sad and angry that her sons were constantly being killed in their battles with the gods. When she could no longer bear it, she spoke to her daughter. How can we stop Indra and others from killing the Asuras time after time? You must do something to prevent your brothers from being slaughtered. Diti's daughter bowed to her mother and set off immediately for the forest. She found a clearing, and after making a circle of 5 fires, she sat in the middle and began her ascetic practice. Her penance was truly awe-inspiring. It shook the 3 worlds, and even Indra's throne rattled and swayed, causing him much discomfort and some confusion. Diti's daughter remained firm in her practice until one day a sage came to her and said, "You shall have your wish, my child. You shall have a mighty son who will challenge the gods for control over the 3 worlds. Let your son ask Brahma for the boons that he needs to become invincible, and they shall be granted to him. Now, please stop this so that the balance of the universe is restored." Having got the blessing she sought, Diti's daughter transformed herself into female buffalo and wandered through the streets of Asura kingdom. The king of the Asuras saw her and knew that she had only taken on the outward form of an animal. He decided to marry her, and when their son was born, half of him was like a man and the other half was like a buffalo. He could take either form as he pleased. His parents lovingly named him Mahishasura, the buffalo demon. His mother told him of the sage's promise. And as soon as Mahisha was old enough, he went off to practice austerities of his own so that the gods would have to give him what he asked for. Like his mother, he was fierce in his penance. Eventually, Brahma came to him and said, "Your austerities are impressive. Tell me, what do you want?" "I want to be immortal. I want to be invincible in battle. No one should be able to kill me." Brahma smiled and said, "Only the gods never die. You cannot be immortal, but you can make it difficult for others to kill you." Mahisha thought for a moment and said, "All right, give me that boon that I can only be killed by a woman. Women are weak, I know that. Even if I were to meet a woman in battle, I could easily overcome her. So this boon will make me immortal." "As soon as you wish," Brahma said and vanished. After his father died, Mahisha became the king of the Asuras. Vidyamali, the great Asura general, came to Mahisha and honored him. He said, "Sire, once we were the kings in heavens and we ruled over the 3 worlds. The gods took our place unlawfully. Bring us back to power. You have the boon you need to defeat the gods." Mahisha knew that it was time to declare war on the gods, and so he gathered the mighty Asura armies and attacked the heavens. The gods sent their best and brightest warrior forward and used their most formidable weapons and their most deadly battle formation, but they were no match for the Asuras led by Mahisha. The great gods Vishnu and Shiva both entered the fray, but all their skills and all their powers and all their weapons were of no use. Indra was defeated, and Mahisha took his throne. He occupied Indra's city Amaravati. He rode Airavata, Indra's magnificent elephant. He commanded Indra's charioteer Matali. He even danced with the Apsaras. Asuras won a decisive victory, and he ruled the 3 worlds. Utterly dismayed, Indra led the gods to consult with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. "We have no hope against this buffalo. He has taken everything we have. Now, how will we return to our rightful place in heaven? We are the gods. That's where we live. The Asuras should occupy the underworld. How do we send them back there?" He said, his forehead wrinkled with worries. "There is one last chance you have," said Brahma. "The boon this Asura asked for and the boon I gave him was that he could only be killed by a woman. Combine your energies, gods of the earth, sky, and fire and water. Combine your energies with those of Vishnu and Shiva and create a woman, a goddess more powerful than each of you individually. She will defeat Mahishasura." Slowly the gods released their energies, which merged as rays of light, as flashes that resembles lightning, as glittering threads at blazing shafts. Vishnu and Shiva did the same, and soon a glorious woman appeared before them. "Give her your weapons," shouted Brahma, and as each god held out his weapon for her, the goddesses produced an arm to take it from him. She took Indra's thunderbolt and Varuna's nose, and Yama's staff and Agni's spear, and Vayu's mace, and Vishnu's discus, and Shiva's trident. And when she had a weapon in each of her 8 arms, a great tawny lion appeared. She mounted the lion, and smiling, she said to the gods, "Have no fear, I will kill Mahisha for you." When the splendid shining goddess roared, the earth shook. When she laughed in excitement, eager for battle, and tossed her dark hair, the ocean shrank back from the shore. But the gods were not afraid. They raised their arms and praised the goddess, bowing low before her and touching their foreheads to the ground. They adorned her with jewels and decorated her with flowers and worshipped her. On this throne in Indra's palace, Mahisha heard the uproar that rang through the 3 worlds. "What is this? What is happening?" he bellowed like a buffalo that he was. "Sire, the gods are regrouping. A new divine being was being created to defeat you," said his ministers. "Come," shouted Mahisha. "The battle calls," he said as he strapped on his armor and picked up his weapons. The Asuras were eager to fight. They cheered and shouted, certain that their king would lead them to victory again. They attacked with arrows and spears and lances and swords and clubs and battle axes. The sky grew dark as missiles from both the sides flew through the air. It rained arrows, but the flashes in the darkness were not lightning. They were the glistening blades of sharp swords as they whistled through the air. In the middle of the melee, the goddess blazed with energy. It seemed as if nothing and no one could touch her as she slashed and swung and pierced and hurled all the weapons at her command. Her face was serene as she struck the Asuras down with her arrows, as she slashed them in half with her sword, as she caught them in her noose and bound them hand and foot, as she battered them with her mace, as she pierced them and pushed them into the ground with her trident. When Mahisha saw his army being crushed in this manner, he transformed himself into a massive buffalo and attacked the goddess's army with his hooves and horns and tails and snorting and panting and pawing the ground. He gored some of her troops. Others he tossed into the air so that they fell to the ground in a heap. He pulverized them with his hooves, and some he snarled in his huge tail, and with a flick he threw them into a great distance. He made others unconscious with his hot breath. Then, maddened with his success, he attacked the goddess's lion, seeking to plunge his deadly horns into its belly. The lion roared and reared up, and the goddess raised her sword and shouted with delight, for she knew that now Mahishasura's moment of death had arrived. The buffalo, laughing, her mouth red and showing her teeth, which were like freshwater pearls, she slashed at the Asura's body and cut it in half. As the buffalo's body thrashed and writhed on the ground, Mahisha emerged from it in the shape of a man. He gazed at the goddess, dazzled by her splendor and her beauty, blinded by her wild hair. But before he could ask for her mercy and grace, she plunged her trident into his neck. He died with his eyes open, shocked that he had been killed by a woman. When Mahishasura fell, there were a great tumult. The Asuras ran from the battlefield, shrieking and wailing, and they headed straight for the underworld, where they would remain for aeons. At the same moment, the gods broke into cries of joy, shouting, "Victory! Victory!" And the goddess' triumphant laughter danced and echoed throughout the 3 worlds. Because goddess Durga killed Mahishasura, she is also called as Mahishasura Mardini. So all Navaratri we celebrate the last day as Vijayadashmi to celebrate the victory of good over evil. Meet you in the next video. Until then, bye.